You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. So this is the week. This is the week where we're all going to watch a grainy video. It's amazing that video from 2005 looks grainy, right? Like it's strange, but it's true.
It's not what you would expect the HD crispness that we're used to.
No, I mean, like 05 feels like eons ago because all of the video that gets shared is in that box format instead of the widescreen format because it's right before HD TVs. Like, I know for the Bears Super Bowl in January 07, I had a brand new HD TV and everything was in digital. But when you look at all the 05 stuff from the White Sox only a couple years earlier, it looks ancient because all the video is like in that square, like, you know, tube TV format, which is really funny. I mean, like that's right around the time when everything changes, and you're going to see all these videos and you're going to see all these recaps, and it's going to be on this date this happened, on this date that happens. And I'm going to be honest with you, as aggravated as I am with this team, as much as I hate this owner, I get chills every time I watch the videos. Every time I think about it, I get a warm place in my heart. Some of my fondest memories with my family, and especially my father, I will keep with me until the day they put me in the ground from that week. Because that week was amazing. And also the entire playoffs run for the White Sox. Like, we had tickets, Ed, and I'll tell this to everybody. We had tickets to every playoff game, but we weren't season ticket holders. Like, we're the people that season ticket holders would hate. We had a connection.
Right.
We paid for the tickets, right? But we got the option to buy tickets. And not like crappy tickets. We were down the first base line just past first base on the lower level for the first two series. And then the World Series, we were down the third base line just past third base on the lower level about 15 rows up. Like, these were solid tickets. They were expensive. We paid for them. Or Dad did. I didn't pay for them. The old man who had the connection paid for them, right? And I remember Dad's plan was, and this is what he did. He said, I'm going to sell game 2 of every series to make back the majority of the money that I spent on the tickets. Now, I want you to think about that. At the time, the reasoning is incredibly sound because they're the home team in every series of the postseason in 05. And we're the White Sox, right? Like, we're not supposed to win anything. As a fan base, we're beaten down. We don't believe it's ever going to happen to us. So if it is going to happen, it's going to happen in game 6. It's going to be a game 7 miracle. Like, you want to be at those games, right? But you don't believe anything's going to happen quickly. Like, you in no way believe they're going to go 11-1 through the postseason. So game 1 of the ALDS against the Red Sox, that's a great game. I mean, they put up a ton of runs. There's a bunch of home runs. It's a lot of fun. And we're celebrating. It's great. But game 2 was the intense, crazy one. Game 2 is the one where Graffinino lets the ball through his legs.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Game 2 has the moments in it that are the better moments than game 1 in that series. When you go to the series for the ALCS with the Angels, game 1, they lose. It's the only loss. They lose 1-0. It's miserable.
And it's the only time a pitcher comes out of the bullpen.
Right. It is a miserable game. Game 2 is AJ with the drop third strike and Creedy coming up with the clutch hit off the wall after Ozuna steals second. Game 2 is the game you wanted to be at. And again, we missed that one because we were like, well, you know, we want game 6 and 7. We're going to go to game 1, of course. So we'll just sell game 2 all the time. So now get to the World Series, of course. Look at this. I mean, like, game 1 was fun. First World Series in a long time. The fun of the pomp and circumstance, all the Houston, you have a problem signs in the crowd. Jermaine Dye hits a home run in the first inning on a 3-2 count, and you're off and running. The moment where Guillen comes out and does the give me the big guy, that was fun to watch in person. And then Bobby Jenks comes out to the POD song. Boom, here comes the boom, ready or not. Here comes the boys from the South. And like everybody's like fist pumping as it comes out. Like it was like that. It felt to me like that scene in Major League where they're singing Wild Thing, but it was cooler in the dark.
Yeah. It's a better moment than Charlie Sheen coming out. Also, Bobby Jenks didn't sleep with anybody on the way out to the mound, so that helps.
But I mean, like, and he gets out there, and I remember, I mean, like that moment actually when Jenks comes out provides me with one of the greatest memories of my father, who's still with us, but one day maybe he won't be, and I'm going to have to remember him. And this will be a moment that I'll always remember. Is I'm there. It's like the only people who are allowed to use these seats was mom, dad, me, and little sis, the foursome of us. Like when we went. Nobody else was going to get to go. Wives weren't going. Husbands weren't going. Relatives weren't going. These were our 4 seats when we went to these games, except for the ones that we sold. And we're sitting there, and I want to say it's Bagwell coming in the 8th when Jenks is called for him. And Jeff Bagwell had dealt with an injury. So there was a question. I want to say it was a rib injury or something that was going on.
It was his shoulder. Injury. His shoulder had been bad all that year.
Yeah. So it was something that might affect his swing. And now we're bringing in a guy that throws 100 or over 100 when that wasn't as common. Because Jenks was an uncommon thing back in 05. Now everybody throws at these ridiculous rates of speed.
Yeah, now you got guys throwing 108. I mean, it's insane.
But when I remember I was at Jenks's debut, sitting right on the dugout with the beers on the dugout against, I want to say it was Seattle, and Lou Piniella was managing him at the time, and he turned around and looked at the group of us just sitting in our seats in the first row and muttered, "Where'd you find this effing guy?" After he'd thrown his first 3 pitches and they kept getting faster and they were all over 100. And then, it was like one of those funny moments where, like, all of a sudden the manager of the team breaks the 4th wall and looks at the fans and goes, "Where'd you get this guy?" So he was an abnormality. And I remember as he's warming up, I turn to say something to my father, and he's not there. He had the aisle seat, 15 rows up, halfway up the section, basically, right? Midway part of the section down the third base line. And he's not there. I'm like, where is he? And my sister goes up.
Where'd he go?
My sister goes up to go look for him. And she comes back down and she goes, first of all, he's standing behind one of the concrete pillars and he's peering around the pillar like he's watching a horror movie because that's how nervous he is. And I go, he's nuts. And she goes, no, he's not the only one. The entire concourse is old men like him pacing around and muttering to themselves like they're in their living room. And she's laughing hysterically. I go, what? She goes, easily 20 to 25 men are up there right now of dad's generation. And you got to think, like my dad's generation, like he was a kid in 59. He saw all these disappointing seasons. He's in his 70s now. Like that generation, they didn't believe they'd ever have any luck ever. They didn't even believe winning the pennant. He celebrated winning the pennant with a bottle of champagne he had kept in the refrigerator since he was married in 1976 because he didn't use it for the World Series. They were never winning the World Series. Just getting to the World Series was all this old man wanted. That's all my dad wanted. So this was house money.
Just see them in a World Series game. That was the goal.
Right. This was all house money. So, I mean, like, he didn't believe they could win a game in the World Series, let alone the series, let alone sweep it. That didn't even run through his mind. So he's up there and it's like, here it comes. Here's the horror movie. Here's the moment where it all falls apart. Here's the Orioles in 83 hurting Ron Kittle.
Oh, yeah.
And Bannister coming out in game 5 and not able to do it. Or was it Hoyt in 5? I can't remember who it is in 5. I was little, but I remember the stories.
Well, you had Britt Burns going like into extra innings.
Yeah, there you
and
go.
Unable to complete it. And then I think, I want to say, I think you're right. I want to say it was Bannister comes out and just throws an absolute terrible game.
So all these men of his age are now they're closer to my age. You think about it, I'm getting close to age. I'm not there yet. But all these guys they're all back there and they're pacing. Right? And they're muttering to themselves. I mean, it's quite a scene. And Jenks comes up and the first pitch he throws, Bagwell swings and misses. And Bagwell's badly behind it because of the shoulder. And everybody cheers. And all of a sudden, and this is the moment that I'll never forget. I feel these hands on my shoulder. And I turn around and it's Dad. He has sprinted down the stairs after the first pitch. Hits me on the shoulder, turns me around, grabs me by both shoulders, his son. Who's an adult. I'm a grown man. I'm married. I got my first child on the way. Like, I'm not a kid. And shakes me furiously. And he keeps yelling, he can't touch him. He can't get around. He can't touch him. And then he lets go of me and he runs back up to go hide behind the post again. I'm like in shock. Like, I'm laughing. I'm cheering. I'm watching him run up the post. The next pitch is coming. Like, that's the moment. I'll never forget that moment, how intense it was. And he came back down. when the Sox are batting, because that's in the 8th inning. And then he went back up and he did the same thing in the 9th inning. He would run down to celebrate when a guy was struck out or when the out was. But he watched every Jenks batter, which I think he strikes out 3 out of 4. In fact, I'll look behind me in the bar. I have a plaque. Yeah. Okay. He watched every Jenks batter in that game 1, hiding behind a post while he and all the other guys of his generation paced around and muttered like they were in their living room during that game. And if that whole group was my dad's generation, then most of them probably don't need Hyatt home medical equipment yet. Some of them might. You may have a father or mother that's a little bit older, and you need to help them switch to a new age of life. Keep mom and dad, grandma and grandpa out of assisted living. Make it so they can get around on their own and live independently. Hyatt home medical equipment has stair lifts, ramps, grab bars, lift chairs, and even bathroom remodeling. They work with insurance and have 0% financing for qualified individuals. If you use a CPAP machine and you don't like your vendor, switch now, get supplies directly mailed to you, and they have the latest and greatest in continuous glucose monitors and so much more. See what Hyatt has to offer at hhme.com. But that was a whole generation pacing up there. I mean, a camera crew up there would have captured just the most amazing sight in the world. It was amazing. Now, that's my game 1 memory. And that's a great memory, but we sold game 2. So I missed the Canerico thing. I mean, I watched it on TV. I watched Pitsenek's walk-off. I thought the apartment complex I was in Beverly was going to collapse during that. And it wasn't because I was jumping around, because I was on my knees in the middle of the living room, because I slid right off the couch on my knees, put my head down as everybody around me is jumping around, and kept telling myself, like, this is a dream. This doesn't happen to my team. Like, that's how unreal the whole thing was, right? And so this week, enjoy it. I know. I don't need to look it up. October 26th, 2005, the greatest baseball day of my life. It's something I think that all White Sox fans who were around during that time remember. And I think it's why we get so aggravated at where the team has been since then. I think that's where the anger comes from. I think that's where, me basically saying, like, Jerry Reinsdorf should just sell this team. I don't care if he sells it. Like, you brought up an interesting point before we sat down.
Well, there's this rumor.
Yeah, say this. Explain this crazy rumor that's out there.
There was an article, and it was an MSN article, I believe, that was talking about the fact that Tropicana Field was really severely damaged in the hurricane. Like, it's not going to be playable in 2025 in all likelihood. And the Rays are going to have to find somewhere to go. They're going to have to go somewhere else to play. And they can't go to Montreal. That was the first place people thought of because, let's have an Expos Renaissance season, but Olympic Stadium's under construction. They won't be able to do it. So one of the ideas that was popped into this article was, well, Jerry Reinsdorf is trying to move the White Sox to the 78, this plot of land. What if the Rays went up there, put up a pop-up stadium, like one of those temporary stadiums like they use in the Olympics? Maybe it only houses 15,000 people or something like that. I think he said 12,000 in the article, but it's a small stadium and the Rays just play their home games there. And, it gets Jerry Reinsdorf an opportunity to show how viable it would be. But there'd be a third team in Chicago for 25.
Oh my God, I'd become a Rays fan for the year. We'd have to cover them both. Right? Like I would, right? I'd have to cover them both because the White Sox, I mean, like I'm very interested. The White Sox are my team. I'm not going to stop being a White Sox fan because the Rays are up here.
Right.
But I mean, I'd go to those games. Like I would go because we're going to be out of it by May. So I mean, like you might want to go and enjoy one of those games.
We're going to be out of it by March. We'll be out of it by February, really, honestly. I mean, it's not going to be, mathematically, yes, eliminated by June, but, the Rays would be, well, it'd be an interesting thing for two reasons. One, you would get to see in real time whether or not the 78 is a viable option for putting up a permanent stadium there. But two, it would show that, hey, if there's good baseball being played, people will come out and see it. And it's not just a question of it's better at the ballpark because of giveaways and concessions and certain types of milkshakes that will go unnamed or fireworks nights or something like that. It's actually the product on the field because I think you would honestly get some Cubs fans that would go to see the Rays play as well.
It would be an interesting thing to see it'd be interesting to see if the other two baseball teams in Chicago would allow it. That's why this is so far-fetched, right? Like, that's why this is pie in the sky and it's crazy. I mean, let's admit, this is pie in the sky and crazy, but it's the offseason, and we're waiting for the White Sox to hire a manager, which I think they'll do by November the 5th before the GM meetings. And I think they're really close. And I don't even think that they have any restrictions if they want to talk to somebody that's in the World Series right now, as long as they do it not on game days. But I think they can actually kind of like whittle this thing down a little bit more. And we may get
as long as the team gives you permission, to talk to one of their coaches, you can talk to them at any point in the playoffs.
Right. But the thing is, as we're sitting here and waiting for it, this is an interesting thing though to kind of discuss. So let's say that it would be a viable thing that was asked for, and let's say that the Ricketts family would be like, whatever, we don't care, we're securing ourselves, and it really comes down to Jerry. Do you think Jerry Reinsdorf, trying to weigh the idea of, I really want this stadium built, but I am going to let another team very close to me, would he go for something like that? I mean, it's an interesting conundrum for him. And I think that he would probably let it happen. And the reason is because his lease says that if he doesn't draw enough people, he actually makes money. Like this group this whole lease, the way it's set up, he actually profits off of you not showing up at the ballpark. So people attending his games, not as big of a deal as you actually think that it is. So maybe he would go and do that. The thing for me though is, I would, if somebody pulled me afterwards, I would say this is a great experience. I love it. I don't think that public funds should be used to build this stadium. I don't see any reason why the White Sox should get this. I don't think Jerry Reinsdorf should get it. Like I mean, I would piggyback off of the idea of like, wouldn't it be cool if a team came up and did the pop-up stadium and everything else like that with. I also am completely okay with, and people have questioned me since the last episode, which if you missed it, go back and listen to it on demand. It's available anywhere podcasts can be found and always at soxinthebasement.com. But people have questioned me like, would you, because I made a comment about it, would you really be okay if the White Sox left and then Major League Baseball just brought another team in, like how the Cleveland Browns like became the Ravens, and then, you know, Cleveland, the Browns name remained and was given to a new franchise. But like, would you be okay with that? Would that bother you? And I actually would be totally fine with it. Anything that removes Jerry Reinsdorf from my fandom makes me happy, right? Like, I'd be fine with that. I mean, imagine if somebody told me right now, you have the option of Jerry Reinsdorf selling the White Sox to a group that's moving the team to Nashville, which is a dumb business decision, and that's why I don't think it would actually happen. But like, we have dumb business people that are going to do dumb business decisions. So first, Jerry's going to get all this capital gains tax because he's dumb. And then Dave Stewart and his investors are going to get this thing moved down to Nashville because they're dumb. And they're all going to make dumb decisions, and it's going to leave this stadium sitting here. And then a team like the Rays that can't wait to get out of Tampa, ironically, because remember, they exist because Jerry Reinsdorf ran a grift down there back in the late 80s that he was going to move a team down to Tampa. And that's why the Rays exist.
And Tampa built what is now Tropicana Field,
right. So then,
in response to what Jerry was doing.
You get this all of a sudden full circle thing decades later where a team like the Rays that is looking to escape is given one of the top markets in the country and a ready-made fan base with a stadium that's in good shape. And they just come up and become the Chicago White Sox. I would take that right now. Sign me up. Right? I would take that right now. Anybody who, it doesn't matter if the ownership, what are you worried about? You're worried about the personnel that would go to the other team? I'm not. Is there any history that's leaving? Not really. We're going to get to keep the history. The White Sox play here. We just have another group that has the White Sox. You just be changing owners. Like, I would think that was great. Some people like feel the ick with that idea. And I'm like, no. I mean, that's a really complicated thing. And another pie in the sky scenario, as we're talking about pie in the sky scenarios. But I mean, like, I would take that right now, Ed.
Well, yeah. And again, what are you really losing? The ones that lose in that scenario, as we laid it out with the Rays becoming the new White Sox and Jerry Reinsdorf's organization going to Nashville and becoming whatever they want to call themselves, it's the Tampa organization that loses out. It's the idea that Tampa's history sort of ends, right? The way that
I want their history too. I'm taking all their good history. We're throwing it in ours,
and that's fine.
I'm absorbing it.
You know, and we can sit there and talk about how in 2008 then the team beat itself.
Right, we beat ourselves in 2008. We actually win the 2008 playoff series because that's our team now. And Nashville lost that. I'll take that.
Right. So we can sit there and play around with how the history plays out between the two franchises, but But what you're losing is, are you really attached to any of the current players, or should you be really attached to any of the current players? Honestly, they're all there to be traded anyway, right? There's nobody on this team that is sitting there going like, wow, this is a lifelong White Sox, and I'd really hate to see him play for somebody else. There's no Frank Thomas on this team. There's no Paul Konerko on this team. There's no Mark Burley on this team.
Luis Robert Jr. has done nothing to make me feel that way about him.
No, not yet. And I'm sorry, they keep telling us that we should feel that way about Andrew Vaughn, but it's kind of like, when you're set up for the prom date, because your mom has a friend who knows somebody who goes to another school. It's like, it's nice, but I don't have any feelings here because I'm being told I'm supposed to like this guy and I don't. So it's a lot of things that would be leaving are not things that you would miss necessarily. And what you'd be gaining is you'd be gaining a competent organization, one that, by the way, has learned to live with not having any money. And now you'd be putting them in a situation where they'd be able to probably make more.
Oh yeah, they make more money. They make more. I bet they seem like a team that's so organized that they could get this Chicago Sports Network thing done real easy. Like they'd figure this out. They wouldn't have screwed it up as bad as Reinsdorf did.
I don't even blame Jerry for this one. I blame Comcast for this one. I mean, this is a battle of two really disappointing organizations in my life. And both of them, I feel like I've been waiting forever for them to do something good. I mean, there's all sorts of situations where, I get texts daily from Comcast about how my internet service is going to be out, and that's both business and personal. I get texts daily from the White Sox like, yeah, we'll compete sometime in the next, 50 years, maybe when Jerry, baseball, go drink a milkshake. What am I getting out of both of these things? But the Rays are a class organization. They're an organization that has been able to compete year in and year out by doing things called scouting and talent evaluation and development and, making good, solid trades and good free agent signings based on what they think they can do with a player. All these things that the White Sox say they're going to do, but then never actually accomplish, right? Because we never see the players actually develop. We never see the good players signed out of nowhere. And if we do get somebody who's kind of signed out of nowhere, they get traded to another team that figures it out. That's the whole Fernando Tatis debacle, right? Signed as a teenager, maybe on the name of his dad, but the White Sox know they got maybe something, but the Padres knew they would really have something if they traded for this kid that nobody even thought about as a prospect at the time. This is what class organizations do. This is what the Rays have always done. They move on from players when they're done. They bring guys along. They have top-end talent. It would be exciting to have that in Chicago. And what we've been waiting for with Jerry to sell the team is, could that happen? If Dave Stewart buys the team, is Dave Stewart going to have that kind of an organization? That's always going to be the question for whoever the next ownership group is. And right now, all we have is Chris Getz saying that that's what we want to do. That's what we think we can do. And Jerry Reinsdorf saying, quote unquote, in a very tailored press release that changes need to be made. But in reality, a lot of the things that he's really concerned about are what's going to happen with a piece of property he doesn't really own that he wants J.B. Pritzker to put money into, who, by the way, was asked about it again the other day and doubled down and said, I just don't see how I don't see how any Illinois taxpayer says spending, and I love the way he said this, spending $1 billion to invest in a company that's already owned by very wealthy people makes any sense for us when the taxpayers could be looking and saying, couldn't we use that capital for something that helps all of us?
Didn't the owner of the soccer team here in Chicago, didn't he just say that he would pay for his own stadium and that he thinks it's crazy that billionaire owners want, like Jerry Reinsdorf hates that guy. He hates him so much. Here's the thing. Well, let's go back to reality now, because we have kind of lived in a fantasy world. I don't think the Rays are coming here to play at the 78. And I don't think Jerry Reinsdorf's selling his team. Okay. I don't think Jerry Reinsdorf's even really considering selling his team, because I don't think it's going to be as profitable for him as people think that it is. And
Nashville's not ready for the White Sox to move there. And none of this is happening.
None of it is happening. So let's snap back into reality now here for a second. What we actually have with this team is we've got a guy who's trying to play games in the offseason. Let Jerry play his games and ignore him. The thing I'm most interested in with this team is some of the stuff that I'm seeing Chris Getz do under the radar while Jerry Reinsdorf has captured the headlines. Like,
right.
everybody's getting fired in the international scouting department. Like, if you're paying attention, there's constantly scouts being let go of in the South American, Central American area. Like, it just seems to be just a nonstop, like, yeah, you guys suck. You're fired. Hey, by the way, you're fired. Like, a lot of you're fired is happening down there, which is really interesting. It also seems as though they have a few viable names of guys that could be the next manager, and there's a thorough search happening, which had not been allowed. There was no thorough search allowed when Rick Hahn was forced to take on Tony La Russa, and the Grifol hire was just a farce. So, like, this is very different. So it's those things that I'm actually paying attention to. Like, we can have fun with, oh, what if Tampa Bay comes up here, and what if Jerry sells a team, and they're all great what ifs, and they're kind of fun to kind of talk about, and they're interesting. But what I'm actually happy with in this offseason is that Getz is actually doing stuff separate from the circus. The circus is over here. Everybody's looking at the circus, but the new hire that's running international scouting is cleaning house. Just like Getz started to clean house the moment he got in there with people he thought were not good for the front office, and we're seeing a really good managerial search from what I can tell that's going on right now. And that's what's important to this team. And then the next stage has to be that Getz goes, all right, I'm only locked into about $45 million, and I got about 45 to 50 that I can spend in free agency. Let's go out and add a little bit of talent to the team that could be flipped at the deadline, or that could actually provide some veteran standing. And by the way, Tim Elko, selected to another squad of international players. Like, this guy played well in AAA, is playing well right now. Colson Montgomery's doing well in the Arizona Fall League, but look out for Tim Elko right now, because I'm telling you right now, that should be your first baseman if you don't go out and get anybody else. Andrew Vaughn and Gavin Sheets need to get their walking papers, and that is the next thing I'm looking for. When it comes time to make that decision, will Chris Getz be different than what I've watched this front office be for the last couple of decades?
And I think the answer to that is safely yes. I do think that
you believe he'll do it.
Just looking, I think he'll do it, because look at those under the radar moves. One of the biggest criticisms I think that you would lay at the feet of Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams was, even in the international market, it was always about the big name, right? It was the Yoelqui Cespedes or Luis Robert Jr. It was that one guy that was supposed to be the guy, the next big superstar. And they'd always put all their eggs into that basket. But when you look at somebody like the Astros, for example, whose pitching staff has been largely staffed by international guys that they've brought along, or you look at other teams who have come up with, well, the Rays, for example, who have come up with a lot of international stars, the reason is because, one, they scout, and two, they cast a much wider net. So if your scouting department can only identify what everybody in baseball is saying, this guy's a super talent, it's no different than looking at the prospect pipeline and saying, well, I'm going to take my best player and trade for the highest level prospect I can on the MLB pipeline. That's not scouting. Okay, I can do that. Anybody can do that. Cleaning house in the international scouting is sitting there saying, we have been largely ineffective at identifying good players and filling our minor league system and building along our minor league system with all of this wonderful international talent that everybody else seems to be able to get their hands on. So that's a huge change. And Getz looking at different managers, talking to coaches, talking to people who are from franchises that have been successful recently, that are currently in uniform, getting permission to interview bench coaches, interview hitting coaches, interview everybody, whoever he's interviewing, okay? Those are the types of guys we did not see them looking for, because Pedro Grifol was what? He was like a quality assurance coach or something like that for the most part with the Royals. And, you're not really talking about a franchise that had done a lot of great things at the time. And Tony La Russa, again, picking Tony La Russa up off the retirement heap, that's not really anything that you need any real talent or thought behind. And Jerry clearly didn't put any thought behind it. And that's largely the White Sox problem. But Chris Getz going through and saying, I'm going to do this, and not sitting there and telling us, like you said, it's under the radar. Here's why I also think it's different. Chris Getz isn't making a big point of getting in front of the cameras the way Kenny would, the way Rick would sometimes, and saying, look at all the wonderful things we're doing. We're going to talk to these managers, and we're going to have the best manager in Major League Baseball next year. We're going to have manager of the year. Chris Getz is just talking to competent baseball people and trying to figure out who's going to mesh well with him and who's going to mesh well with what they want to do. It's a lot of things that we don't know of as White Sox fans because we haven't seen it happen. But I honestly do. I still believe, even though Chris Getz, he could still get used in the trade market, I'd be leery about him making trades. I'm still convinced he's going to be even more handcuffed than you and I think he's going to be by Jerry Reinsdorf and the budget. But I do like the fact that he is trying to surround himself with better and not telling us he's trying to surround himself with the best or that he knows what's best. He's just trying to find what are good people that are going to make my job easier. How am I going to have a good, solid pipeline of international talent to come through so that I have trade bait and I have guys that I can bring up onto my major league roster who can contribute and or be stalwarts in the lineup, stalwarts on the mound? What can I do to have a manager who I don't have to sit there and worry about whether, one, he's awake in the dugout, or two, whether or not the team wants to basically kill the guy? So there's a lot of reason to be optimistic there. And the beautiful thing is, like you said, we don't have to be in fantasy land, and we don't necessarily have to look at just grainy old footage to see that the White Sox might be doing something worth paying attention to this year.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.